She didn't break your heart. She revealed that you never claimed it. Most men don't choose women. They beg to be chosen. They call it chemistry, fate, love at first sight. But it's not love. It's hunger wearing perfume. You weren't trained to select. You were trained to submit, to mistake chaos for passion, to call abandonment romance. And while you thought you were falling, you were handing over the crown you never learned to wear. This isn't about hating women. It's about exposing the war most men are losing, not on the battlefield, but in their beds. Because when you kneel too soon, you're not loved. You're used, forgotten, replaced. Machiavelli didn't teach cruelty. He taught discernment. And in a world where beauty distracts and approval feels like oxygen, most men forget their birthright. They confuse being seen with being worthy. But a king never needs to be seen to know what he is. This is for the man who's done begging, who's ready to stop calling his wounds destiny, who's ready to choose like a ruler. He didn't choose her, he chose relief. He called it love because calling it starvation would have forced him to look at himself. What he craved wasn't a woman, it was anesthesia. But the soul always knows when it's being drugged. He mistook the echo of his own wounds for destiny. She didn't fill the void, she became the void's shape. Anxious men often call their panic passion because the hunger feels holy. But love that begins with trembling hands usually ends with a broken spine. That wasn't fate, that was self-abandonment. Jung would say, you weren't falling for her, you were falling into yourself. Not the part that's sovereign, the part that begs to be seen. You gave her your fire, hoping she'd boil your emptiness into meaning. But all she did was mirror your ache, and that mirror became a mask. This is the anatomy of addiction, not to a substance, but to significance, to being chosen, to being noticed. And in that trance you forgot. Kings don't beg. They sit in silence until they remember the weight of their crown. Machiavelli warned that power unclaimed is negotiated, and you didn't negotiate. You surrendered. You lowered your gaze, softened your edge, handed her your hunger. And when she left, you blamed her appetite. But it was your starvation that opened the gates. This isn't about blaming her. This is about asking, why were you so empty that her touch felt divine? Why did a glance from her silence your truth? Love cannot be real if it's built on a man's disappearance. You weren't choosing her, you were avoiding yourself. She wasn't magic. She was medicine for your ache, temporary, numbing, costly. And now that she's gone, the hunger returns louder, sharper. But maybe this time you won't run from it. Maybe this time you'll look it in the eye and say, I see you, but I don't serve you anymore. Because a king doesn't enter the marketplace to be fed. He feeds himself in solitude. He bleeds alone if he must, but never for scraps. And when he does choose, it's from clarity, not compulsion. There's a certain type of woman that haunts men, not because she's cruel, but because she doesn't look back. And that silence feels like home. Because for most men, invisibility started early. You weren't seen as a boy. You were observed, measured, told to behave. And that absence became familiar, like gravity. So when she ignores you, it doesn't feel wrong. It feels honest. You call it a challenge, a mystery, maybe even fate. But the truth is, you're chasing the ghost of a parent who never returned. The harder she pulls away, the more certain you are that she's the one, because your nervous system isn't drawn to love, it's drawn to patterns. Machiavelli once wrote, "Men submit quickly to cold thrones if they offer warmth." And that's what she offered. Not love, but hope of it. A flicker of attention, then the drought. A compliment, then the cold shoulder. It's not magic, it's a cycle. This isn't desire, it's validation addiction. Every breadcrumb becomes sacred. Every absence becomes sacred. You don't miss her, you miss what her silence used to mean. That maybe, just maybe, this time, someone will come back. But ghosts don't return, they repeat. You gave her your best, your focus, your fire, your forgiveness. But it was never about her. It was about you trying to rewrite your childhood. Every ignored message was a subconscious prayer. Please, someone, see me. The worst part? She didn't do anything wrong. She was never obligated to love you, but that's what makes the pain sharper. She simply didn't feel you, and that stabbed deeper than betrayal. This is the lie you must finally kill. Her rejection doesn't prove your unworthiness. It proves your trauma hasn't healed. You weren't chasing her. You were chasing the version of you that finally gets chosen, because when you confuse neglect with value, you'll keep loving the ones who never look up and calling it romance. But it's not. It's the sound of your echo, trying to become a voice. He thought if he gave more, he'd be loved more, but every gift he offered came with a silent apology. Please don't leave. He didn't give to share. He gave to be chosen. Some men were taught that to be worthy of affection, they must disappear, shrink their needs, hide their anger, overfunction until empty, and when the love still vanishes, they wonder what else they could have sacrificed. This isn't generosity, it's survival, the silent hangover of a childhood where affection was earned, not given. So now, as a man, he becomes the provider of everything, except his own soul. She never asked for everything, but he gave it anyway. Because somewhere inside, he believed that if he just proved himself enough, she'd see him. But love doesn't work that way. The neediness in disguise is still neediness. Machiavelli would have laughed. The man who gives without leverage becomes forgettable. Power isn't in giving, it's in knowing when not to. A sacred thing loses its value when it's always available. She didn't leave because he wasn't enough. She left because he gave her everything and kept nothing sacred. He abandoned the throne to build hers, but thrones built on self-erasure always crumble. Love doesn't require proof. Power does. And when a man offers all of himself without being asked, he's not being romantic. He's pleading for validation. He wasn't too little. He was just never his. She didn't destroy him. She simply mirrored what he'd been doing to himself all along. Giving, pleasing, disappearing. He thought being good would protect him. That if he was kind enough, loyal enough, soft enough, he'd be safe. But goodness without grounding is just a mask for fear. And fear disguised as virtue always folds. He didn't want to lead. He wanted to be liked. Not out of arrogance, but exhaustion, because being feared felt cruel, and being firm felt selfish. So he chose approval over truth, and called it character. But kindness without a backbone becomes currency. He traded his silence for peace, his clarity for comfort. He apologized for having needs, and bowed when he should have stood. And still, it was never enough. Machiavelli saw it clearly. It is better to be feared than loved when one must choose. Not because fear is power, but because love without respect is theater, and no woman loves the man she can move at will. The good man often believes love is performance. He shows up, fixes things, smiles through discomfort, but he never says no. He never says enough, and that's where he dies, quietly, invisibly. She didn't betray him. She simply stopped feeling him. Because his goodness became weightless. A man without edge doesn't anchor her. He flatters, but never challenges. He thought decency was his crown, but it became his silence. He was crowned in kindness and dethroned by it. Because when a man cannot choose presence over performance, he disappears. Being good is not the same as being grounded. One seeks harmony, the other radiates it, and until he stops auditioning for love, he'll keep being cast as the man she forgets. He thought her needing him was love, that being useful meant being chosen, so he became the emotional paramedic, the fixer, the silent mule. But what he called devotion was just dependence dressed as purpose. She leaned on him, not out of reverence, but routine. He mistook her reliance for respect. But the truth is, she depended on his silence, not his soul, and he was too afraid to lose her to tell the difference. A man raised to be useful becomes terrified of being still. So he pours himself into her wounds, not realizing he's bleeding out in the process. He confuses exhaustion for intimacy and overextension for connection. Machiavelli was clear. He who cannot command himself will serve others endlessly. And that's what he became, a servant, not a sovereign, useful but never sacred, present but never felt. She didn't stay because she loved him. She stayed because she could depend on his predictability, on his inability to walk away. She built comfort on his confusion and called it partnership. When a man gives himself in pieces, he becomes a function, not a presence. She'll ask for more, and he'll keep giving, until he forgets there was ever a him to give. Respect doesn't grow in the soil of self-abandonment. It dies there, quietly. And when she finally leaves, he won't understand why, because he never realized he was the transaction. He wasn't her lover. He was her strategy, her escape plan, her emotional safety net. And what he called love was just his fear of being unneeded. He stopped being a man, started being her echo. He wore her preferences like armor, thinking it would make him unbreakable. But the more he adapted, the less of him remained. This wasn't compromise. It was quiet extinction. A man who edits himself for love isn't loving. He's negotiating. He thought if he shape-shifted enough, she'd never leave. Jung would have called it anima distortion, the projection of worth into her gaze. She didn't fall for him. She fell for the mirror he held up, and the moment it cracked, so did the illusion. He was terrified she'd see who he really was, not realizing she never did, because he never showed it. He gave her a reflection, but no reality. Machiavelli warned of this in another form. A man who cannot define himself will be redefined by others. He didn't just surrender his power, he outsourced it. And when she reshaped him, he called it growth. He silenced his instincts. He dimmed his anger, his needs, his edge, not because she asked, but because he believed being chosen required obedience. But kings aren't chosen, they choose. She wasn't evil. She simply responded to the script he wrote, a script where his identity was on lease. He was a mirror, not a man, and when she broke the mirror, he mistook it for heartbreak. Stop negotiating your soul for connection, because if she only loves you when you're edited, she doesn't love you. She loves control. And you were never supposed to be a puppet. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. He thought surrender would win her, that humility would soften her. But the man who kneels before being seen isn't noble. He's invisible, and no woman remembers what she never respected. From childhood, he learned love was earned by shrinking, so he dimmed his voice, softened his presence, tied his worth to approval, and called it devotion. Machiavelli said, "The prince who kneels first invites conquest." And that's what happened. He thought he was offering his heart, but she saw a throne, and no one respects a throne that bows. She didn't fall for his tenderness. She walked over his silence, because when you bend before being asked, they assume it's who you are, not a gesture, but a posture. This wasn't love. This was submissive bonding. The same reflex that made him apologize for things he didn't do. The same reflex that turned arguments into confessions, even when he wasn't guilty. She tested his edges. He flinched. She pushed harder. He folded faster. And in her eyes, the man became an echo. You weren't chosen. You were useful, until your silence grew heavy, until she needed something solid to lean on and found you still kneeling, unmoved, forgettable. Don't mistake access for affection. She stayed not because you were unforgettable, but because you were always available. You weren't a lover, you were a subject. He gave her his heart like a contract, not as a gift, but a plea. He didn't say, "Hold this." He said, "Make me real." And when she left, he didn't just lose her, he lost himself. You weren't loving her. You were hoping she'd remind you who you were. The way she looked at you, the warmth in her laugh. You mistook that for identity, but identity outsourced is identity surrendered. Jung warned, "He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens." You weren't in love, you were outsourcing meaning. Hoping she'd finish the sentence your soul never dared to write. But she couldn't. No one can. She didn't abandon you, she freed you from your distraction, because while she held your heart, you stopped holding your center. You waited for her validation like rain, and called every drought a betrayal. This is how addiction begins, not with alcohol or sex, but attention, relief. You weren't addicted to her. You were addicted to the version of you she temporarily reflected. She became your mirror, and when it cracked, you mistook that shatter for death. But what died wasn't your heart, it was the illusion that someone else could do the work your soul was born to do, that someone could make you whole without you showing up. You pawned your crown for comfort, traded presence for dependency, let her gaze become your compass, and when it turned away, you were lost. But the road back isn't to her, it's through you. She didn't save you. She delayed the confrontation. And now the mirror is gone. So go face what you've been avoiding, not to find her again, but to remember you never needed to be found. You weren't born to be chosen. You were born to choose. Most men never learn that. They orbit the feminine, hoping to be worthy. But kings don't orbit, they build. Ask yourself, when did you first believe that love required kneeling? When did approval become your compass? And how many parts of yourself did you amputate just to be held? This isn't about becoming cruel. It's about becoming clear. A man who knows his worth doesn't fear her absence. He respects it, and he walks away when his crown starts to rust. Because the woman you choose shapes your legacy. She either multiplies your fire or devours it slowly, calling it need. What if everything you were looking for in her was just what you abandoned in yourself? You're not here to be understood. You're here to remember. Subscribe if you're done performing. Turn on notifications if you're ready to rebuild without applause. And keep walking this path of brutal self-knowledge and emotional freedom. You thought she betrayed you. But what if she was just playing by rules? You never learned to read. In the next video, we uncover the game beneath the heartbreak and why Machiavelli would say you were never betrayed, only unprepared.